Welcome back to another discussion of Brian Jacques' Redwall series. As I've been rereading this series, there's been an inevitable dialogue in my head. These were books I read when I was 8 to 12 years old. Can I still enjoy them in my late 20s, especially when some of the problems with the book were obvious to me even when I was a kid? What I found is that the quality of the prose in these books is so good that combined with the comfort of their familiarity has made them an enjoyable reread despite those flaws. It has also allowed me to sort of approach these flaws not as some sort of damning characteristic, but as something I could reflect on. So one of the critiques of Redwall books is that they are repetitive and, as a result, kind of predictable. So I thought to ask the question, what if Redwall books had, dun dun dun, plot twists? Now, from a writer's craft perspective, all stories have plot twists, some surprise in the action that pushes the protagonists along. But obviously, people know when I say plot twists, I'm meaning ones that pop off the page, M. Night Shyamalan stuff, where the reader says, I did not see that coming. So in trying to come up with plot twists for Redwall books, while none of these are really plausible things Brian Jacques would have done, I did try to root them in the context of each individual book so that another writer in Brian Jacques' place might very well have made these kind of decisions. So I'm going to talk about what I consider to be the 8 classic Redwall books today, but if later down the road I get more ideas for later books in the series, I may move on to them. No promises. But let's start with book 1, Redwall. When thinking about a plot twist for this one thing that's kind of weird about Redwall is you'll have these various characters just sort of pop out of nowhere and just sort of invite themselves into the plot and come and live with the main characters, and no one acts like it's weird at all. The most prominent example of this is Basil Staghair. And who doesn't love Basil? He's the template for all future hairs in the series. He's a hyper-skilled fighter who manages to be sort of lighthearted and quippy, and he also likes to sculpt down his food. What? And he has that funny accent. But why does this hyper-competent hare just show up out of nowhere? And why, given his competence, does he not supersede the young bumbling mouse Matthias? Why isn't he the hero who saves Redwall Abbey? Something's not right here. So what if, hear me out, Basil Staghair comes to Redwall because he was banished from the long patrol of Salamandastron after being accused of trying to foment a rebellion? And what if after this plan fails, his next plan is to secretly hire the rat Clooney the Scourge to help him secure Redwall as his own fortress? If he can't have Salamandastron, he'll form an empire somewhere else. Don't get me wrong, Clooney's a great villain, but wouldn't Basil have made an even more terrifying foe, I say, jolly old chaps? What? Book 2, Mossflower. Mossflower is the story of woodland critters resisting the kitty dictatorship of Queen Sarmina. Bella the Badger suggests that the only way Sarmina can be defeated is if her father, the legendary warrior Bor the Fighter, is persuaded to return from the faraway mountain of Salamandastron to Mossflower Woods. I interpreted this book as being about the limits of aristocratic society. Sarmina is the straight up evil aristocrat, whereas the Badgers are good aristocrats. But what Martin the Mouse learns is that he can't rely on the Badgers to save Mossflower Wood. Instead, the ordinary creatures, the mice, the squirrels, the otters, the hedgehogs, the moles, have to get together and collectively save the day, rather than rely on this vaunted outsider savior named Bor. Now, that said, what if this book's criticism of Badger exceptionalism and Badger aristocracy was harsher? In a way, it's actually kind of weird that Martin, the best mouse warrior, along with Gonf, another valuable soldier, is just sent off in this quest in the middle of the war against Sarmina. And what if the reason they were set out on that quest was not really to retrieve Bor, because Bor had been dead for years? What if Bella already knew that, and she was trying to get Martin and Gonf out of the way, because Bella and Sarmina had secretly been collaborating the whole time to maintain their privileged aristocratic positions of wealth, while the rest of the creatures of the Mossflower Wood were left in poverty? And now, with Martin sent out on this hopeless fetch quest, he couldn't cause any trouble. Book 3, Mattimeo. So this book struck me as having a very intriguing, theme-rich beginning, but then it became one of the weaker Redwall books as it moved along. Became kind of a generic Redwall wild goose chase. Slagar, the villain of this book, is the only Redwall villain to officially receive a backstory in an earlier book. Another thing that stood out to me about this book is that when Slagar first kidnaps the children of Redwall, there's this brief moment where the characters entertain the idea that Slagar didn't do it and it was a red herring. You know, Winifred the Otter accuses Slagar right away, but then Matthias, the hero of the book, says, hey, we can't assume all foxes are bad. Let's look at all the facts. Now, I found that line where Matthias questions Winifred's judgment kind of weird because in Brian Jakes' world, yeah, pretty much all foxes are bad. You know, there was nothing to be gained of Matthias investigating other possibilities. The characters all conclude pretty quickly that it was Slagar that did it. But what if, in a different writing of Mattimeo, Matthias knew something that Winifred and we the readers, in fact, didn't know? So in the 8 years between Redwall and Mattimeo, what if Matthias had been out training as an abbey warrior and he had traversed Redwall country meeting many great warriors? What if one of those great warriors was a fox, a benevolent fox? And that fox, in addition to being a great noble warrior, was the estranged husband of Sela and a father of the fox who would go on to be known as Slagar the Cruel. You see, Mattimeo opens up with father-son tension. You know, Matthias worries that Mattimeo is too reckless, too invested in being a warrior and not in being an upstanding citizen. What if Slagar had the same issue with his own father once upon a time? And what Matthias realizes is that he doesn't intervene and save Mattimeo from Slagar's clutches soon, Slagar may very well corrupt Mattimeo and turn Matthias's own son to the dark side. Book 4, Mariel of Redwall. In this book, I found the role of the villain to be a bit unique. The villain in this book is this pirate rat named Gabool the Wild. Mostly, we don't see him attacking the good characters. That kind of all happened in the early chapters of the book or before the events of the book took place. Rather, what Gabool does for most of the book is he's this fated dictator trying to kill out all his rivals amongst the other pirate rats. As such, Mariel's desire to fight Gabool is not practical in the way, say, Matthias's desire is to fight Clooney or Slagar. You know, she's not immediately saving herself. Rather, she's kind of set on revenge for its own sake. And this, I think, is kind of the intentional theme of the book. In the book's ending, Mariel's father, Joseph, says, it's kind of good that we were spared from revenge. You know, the world has its own way of dealing with evil. But what if the book leans into this theme harder? What if when Mariel arrives at Gabool's castle, Terramort, Gabool is already dead? Let's say he's slayed by his own pet scorpion. And then, in this agitated, vengeance-desiring state, Mariel's not just like, okay, great, mission accomplished, but instead she's like, well, I have to kill something. And so she starts hacking away at the scorpion, and it looks like she's going to kill it. And then Dandin has to play the role of Princess Nausicaa and intervene and say, Mariel, this isn't you. Stop it. The blood wrath is destroying you. Now you're killing a creature who you don't have any score with. And the story ends as Mariel awakens from her blood wrath, and she and Dandin and their friends work to heal the scorpion as they saw even the potential of a well-meaning mouse to turn to the dark side. Book 5, Salamandastron. So compared to a lot of the other books on this list, this is already a sort of fairly nuanced narrative. But there was a moment in the first third of this book when it looked like it was going to be something completely on another level from the rest of the series before it was normalized a fair bit. So it briefly experimented with the idea of rehabilitating vermin characters, and it also briefly experimented with Redwallers accusing one of their own, Samkim the Squirrel, of manslaughter. Now, in the book that Brian Jakes ends up writing, this tension is kind of wrapped up quickly. He doesn't end up rehabilitating the two Stoats, and the Redwallers figure out pretty quickly that Samkim did not, in fact, shoot Brother Hal. But what if Brian Jakes had written this book to gradually reveal that maybe it wasn't the Stoats? Sure, they were recklessly playing with arrows. Sure, they think they committed the murder and have to run away in shame. But what if it's gradually revealed someone has an even bigger shame, and it's Samkim, that at that moment he too was playing with arrows, and it was actually his arrow that hit Brother Hal. So what if the book had to deal with the fact that the Stoats were wrongfully accused, and Redwall is forced to question that not every evil act comes from evil intentions? Book 6, Martin the Warrior. Now, this is a book I don't think I would change because I think as is, it's perfect. It's sort of Brian Jacques working within rules of his own writing logic to tell a fairly three-dimensional story. And specifically, what's so great about this one is this is the book where it finally becomes clear that the only tension in the world is not between good and evil, that you can have differences of opinion within the good camp. Particularly, we see that difference between the mostly pacifist mouse Brome and the vengefully violent resistance of Feldo. Feldo's unique darkness particularly comes out when he kills a Bangvol called Droop. Droop is basically the Uncle Tom of the series, this slave who rats out all the other characters in order to try and get himself a better life. But what if Droop wasn't the only enslaved beast that Feldo killed? What if Feldo got darker? What if Feldo begins to take the view that bad politics are undermining the resistance from within? That the real enemy isn't even the slavers, it's the pacifists who refuse to properly resist and condemn the slavers, who are too soft on the evil of bad rank. Martin the Warrior, spoiler alert, famously ends with the tragic death of Martin's love, Rose the Mouse, when she is killed in battle by Badrang. But what if it happened differently? What if Feldo finally loses it and tries to kill Brome? And what if Brome's sister Rose tries to save him? So what if it's not Badrang, but Feldo who kills Rose? Book 7, The Bellmaker. This one's a lot harder to talk about because its plot is in so many pieces, and I found it to be a very convoluted book. One of the weird pieces of this book, though, is that the main villain wears wolf's fur on his head, even though wolves don't otherwise exist in the Redwall universe. Another weird part of this one is that when 5 Redwallers are sent out on a mission, they do so having been told a riddle that only 4 of them will return to Redwall Abbey. But rather than haunting the book, Brian Jacques kind of allows the riddle to be forgotten, and then at the end of the book, the characters briefly worry about it, and then it's like, no, nobody worry. Joseph the Bellmaker's just taken a job somewhere else. He's perfectly fine. But what if that riddle had more weight? What if the 5 Redwallers get to Castle Floret and it quickly becomes apparent that they are not, in fact, strong enough to save the day? What if Joseph then gets an idea? Joseph has a long backstory that we don't know about. And what if in this backstory, he knows the area around Castle Floret, including a place where wolves live? So what if Joseph goes to meet with the leader of the wolves to plead him to avenge the death of the wolf whose fur is worn by Urgot Nagru? And then the wolves come into the battle and save the day. But rather than this feeling like a cheap Deus Ex Machina, this comes with a cost, with very sad news. You see, most of the wolves believe Joseph and went off on the quest as requested by him. But he's still a mouse walking into wolf territory. And what if one of the few wolves that didn't believe what Joseph was up to just saw him as prey and killed him? Book 8, The Outcast of Redwall. This one is a tough one to come up with an epic plot twist for because it really feels like 2 stories. Also, it comes with the question, because this has the character of Bella in it, do I presume that the plot twist I proposed for Mossflower had already happened? So what I'm going to do for this book is I'm going to propose 2 plot twists, and they could possibly go together. So The Outcast of Redwall is a controversial book because its B-plot follows Vale the Ferret, who despite being raised at Redwall develops criminal tendencies, mainly theft. The book's message seems to be that because he's a ferret, Vale is predestined to be bad. And what I feel like really takes this controversy to another level is it kind of embodies a 1990s broken windows policing philosophy that says that all crime is related. So the Redwall creatures assume that because Vale is a liar and a thief, therefore he must just be absolutely evil. He just must be waiting to be a murderer. And in the text, Vale does ultimately get caught attempting to poison Redwall's cook. But what if that crime, that attempted murder that seals Vale's fate, was actually one in which he wasn't fully culpable? What if someone had given him the poison, telling him that it was just some sort of mild prank serum that would give the cook diarrhea or something? What if that someone was hired by Skipper Joe the Otter, or Bella, or even Abbess Miriam, the creatures at Redwall most biased against Vale from the start? You see, the plot of this book follows all the good creatures of Redwall trying to convince the big-hearted mouse Bryony that her trust in Vale is misplaced, that one of these days he's going to be evil and break her heart. But what if Bryony does a fairly good job and, constrains Vale to only committing robberies? The hate in the heart of these Redwall creatures might drive them to make Vale commit a murder so they can kick the slimy ferret out of Redwall for once and all and be proved right. So I said I thought maybe this book should have 2 plot twists. So the other part of this book, the main part of this book, in fact, is about Sunflash the Badger. Sunflash is mentioned briefly in Mossflower as Bella's long-lost son. In this book, he has lost all his memory. Yet by coincidence, he starts calling himself Sunflash after his kestrel friend Scarlaugh describes his yellow fur in the same way that clearly his parents did, as looking like a flash of sun. So within the context of this book, it serves as a convenient plot device. Brian both gets to say Sunflash lost all his memory, and he coincidentally remembers his real name. But what if this was like the real world and things don't just happen that conveniently? What if this coincidence was too good to be true? And Sunflash comes to realize that he is not, in fact, that Sunflash. He comes to think that, he is the heir of Brocktree and Boar and the son of Bella, but then he runs into the original Sunflash. What would happen then? Would Bella denounce him when she realizes he's not really her son, he's some scummy impostor? Such a revelation could really subvert the sense of destiny that is suggested throughout this book. Could also really enforce the book's theme that the good creatures of Redwall are not, in fact, morally perfect. And their ability to misraise Vale could also line up with their ability to be cruel to Sunflash. So I had fun coming up with plot twists to Redwall books. To be clear, I'm not saying I would want them to all be real. I think the advantage to these books being kind of repetitive is there's a comfort and safety in reading them. And even though I don't always like the moral simplicity, I wish more of the stoats and ferrets and rats had happy endings, at very least, you're not going to get the kind of heartbreak of finding out that a character like Basil was evil all along. I really don't like to watch Scooby-Doo because I find it unsettling how the Mystery Machine characters are so nonchalant about ripping the mask off Old Man Jenkins and then being like, yeah, cops, take Old Man Jenkins away. And I'm like, well, Old Man Jenkins was your friend at the beginning of the episode. Well, why can't you narcs come up with a prison abolitionist solution to this? But anyway, it was just a fun exercise to come up with what plot twists to Redwall books would be. And let me know in the comments below if you have ideas for Redwall plot twists of your own. And see you next time.